Hello and welcome to Geekatplay Studio. This is the 6th in our series of Beginner's View tutorials, and today we're going to be talking about how to add plants and some rocks into our terrain, and just to get those details in there. Up till now we've just kind of painted on our greenery onto the rocks, and what we want is some more details in there. So the easiest, we'll start with putting in a material here. We'll just load in our vegetation. And that just kind of paints a little bit of texture that looks like grass, maybe some things that might look like rocks sticking out, but we want actual plants. Now there are a few ways we can do this. First, we do it manually. And we can choose maybe some kind of a tree here. So we could choose maybe the cherry tree right here. And I click OK. Takes a while to load. And there it pops right up. And it's kind of stuck in the ground there. Its bottom is actually on the ground plane. And so we need to move that. And I want it a little, I like them a little to the side there. But now we need to move our camera. So that we can even see this tree. The tree is very large. There we go, and there's our tree there, and I've cut off some of it. That's okay. And if we want to add a rock here, we could go and click here, and that brings in a rock. I'll move this back here to the side a little bit. Make sure it's not floating in the air. I can rotate it. You know, make it look bury it in there. And let's do a quick render of that. I want to render it to the screen at 640 by 480, and that's set for the rest of the time now. And I'll hit render. And there's our tree and our rock. Now, it would take a long time if we were populating with our one at a time, adding a tree and adding a rock. And really, what this is for is kind of our centerpieces. We don't want to have to put them in one at a time all the time. And so the solution for this is to add in an ecosystem. And I don't think I want the rock there right now. So I'll just cut that rock out, and we'll also say goodbye to our cherry tree. I'll move my camera back in there a little bit. So we'll click back on our terrain here, and what View has given us is something called, we don't want to edit the material, we want to load that material. It's something called an ecosystem, and I pointed that out to you in the last tutorial. And we'll just work with this hill grass right here, but if you notice, there's these ecosystems and what came with View, and there's several of them that you can use, and a lot of interesting things you can find in there. Forest and rocks, different kinds of trees, but it doesn't have to be plants and rocks. There's maybe a stone wall here. They just go around, and lots of interesting things you can put here. Here's a highway with cars. So the ecosystem is really a powerful tool in Vue. And I'm going to go back and I'm going to use this one. I really like how that one looks. And when I click OK on it, it pops up, do you want the ecosystems to be automatically populated? And I say yes. And here they are, all the way populated for us already. Let's do a render of that just so you can see what that looks like. How we have some rocks right here. And you can see coming up a few plants. You notice this takes a lot longer to render. And that's just because we have a lot more objects in here. A lot more things that need to be calculated out. You can see the different kinds of plants that are in here though. And how interesting that looks. And I think I want to turn this into more of a forest or something. I want to add some trees into here now. We just have these kinds of smaller plants in here. So one thing I can do is go into this and edit the terrain. And this is why it's useful to be in the advanced material editor. You can only be in that for the ecosystem, because now we have these different things that we can control. The general is what is in our ecosystem and what's underneath. You know, we just have some rock underneath there. And look at all these different plants we have there. And density, you can see it's really dense. It's up to 95%. And you can place these in different ways, and we'll talk about that at a different time. Scaling and orientation, that's also something that's an interesting way to control how your things come up, and we'll go with that a different tutorial. Right now I want to work with general, and I want to add in something. So I click on this button, add. I could add more rocks if I wanted to. I could add more plants, an object, and like I said, the object can be anything. We've done robots before. So I'll bring in a plant right now, and I think I want to go with this springtime white birch. So I'll click OK on that. And when I click OK, you didn't see anything come up, and that's because every time you change something here, you need to press this button, populate. So I'll press populate, and now you see they've all popped up here. And you'll see what that looks like is just a mass of trees. You can't even see through it, and I don't want that many trees. So, and I'm not sure that I want them that big. I can see how big they are in relationship to everything else. So I'm not sure I want them quite that big. So I have this scale, and that's how big. I think I want them probably about 50% of what they are, and I have the presence of them. Now remember, this density is really high. I don't want these trees nearly as dense, so I'm going to drop this down to, we'll try about 50% of what it is, and nothing's changed, and that's because I need to click the populate again, and that will change it. So it's a little bit sparser. You can see a little bit more. I think I want to see a little more sky there, so I want them smaller, maybe just a little bit. And what I think will really help is to make them even less there. So I'll click on populate. I think I might like that. Maybe one more less, so they're 0.2. Let's click OK. And let's get a bit of a look at that. I'll hit my render button. Now, I'm liking how this is turning out, but it's not exactly what I want. And I think what I want is a little bit more control over where the trees are placed. And I can do that. I might not want this tree here. I might want this tree moved here. And I can have a little bit more control. And the way I do that, so I'll go back in here and edit this material, is I'm going to remove them from that because I think I want the rest of everything scattered how it is. And I'll paint them in. And here's this paint button. Now the clear is obvious. If I press clear, they're all gone. You don't see it. And look, now you see just this plain rock. If I press populate, it's all back. So if I press paint, I have this new window pop up, and there are a couple of things I can do. I can press a single instance, and if I do the single instance, when I go in here and click on the terrain, one tree will pop up. I could do that and put 1 or 2 or 3 trees like that, but I want a few more. So if I use the brush, now you see this red circle has popped up. I can just brush them in. And just a few come in there, and I don't want that many. And I don't want them right in front of the too close to the camera because I want to see some of this vegetation there. So we'll look at how that looks there. And I think I like how that looks a little bit more. Maybe I want a couple a little bit closer to the camera. But maybe I think that's still a little bit too dense for me. So I like the scale. So I'll make it a little denser as I put it in there. But right now I need to erase what I put there. And I'm still selected only on the springtime white birch. And I want to go back and say I'm using only selected items. I could paint in a bit of everything, but right now I'm just working with the birch. So see, now the circle is black. Now go in there, erase it, and they're all gone. All those, just the trees. So I'll bring in my brush. I've reduced the scale a little bit, or the density a little bit. Increase that scale just a bit. Now I'll just click in here and I have a few. So one thing I want to tell you is really, I said it last time, don't be afraid to experiment. Don't be afraid to mess up with that. And that looks pretty good. So I'll just click on my main camera. Move that up a little bit. Get some more sky. Move that where I want it. That's a nice thing too about it, is if you have a scene that you want. So now I'm going to load in an atmosphere. And one of the reasons why we do an atmosphere last, we have this kind of easy atmosphere that's just some background light for our default at Geekatplay. But one of the reasons we want to do an atmosphere last is because the lighting can get kind of complicated in and scattering the light and bringing in the clouds, and it takes a lot longer to render that. So I think this is maybe a spring kind of a morning, so we'll click OK. No, I don't like how that looks. So I'll load in a different atmosphere. Early morning. Click OK. That looks a little brighter, and we'll go with that. So I'll click the render so we can take another look at what we've got here. And see, I have a few less trees. You can see behind. You can see the plants. And you can see these rocks come up. You know, I might want to get rid of that tree. I can use the eraser for that. I might want to add another tree in behind back here. And that's just one of the things that makes View a really powerful tool for creating a terrain and creating a nice looking environment. We hope you've enjoyed this tutorial from Geekatplay Studio, and if you have any questions or if you need any resources, and we'd love to have you come to our forum, please come to www.geekatplay.com or viewtutorials.com.